I know for some people it's early morning, so I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. You are being recorded, and a little bit of housekeeping. I have 4 great panelists. I'm going to have them introduce themselves a little bit later. But the chat is open. If you have questions or comments, please go ahead and put them in there. Savannah, who is behind the scenes helping us at NAWIC National, will give us the questions later. There'll be time for Q&A later on. So welcome to Child and Family Care, a global workforce challenge. And we'll get going. So is there anything I left out? Yes, please use the chat, comment, but we'll respond to questions later. Okay. So agenda, really, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Global Partners, who we are. Just quickly, I'll give you an overview of the survey, and then you'll meet the panelists, and we'll begin our discussion. So the Global Partners actually started with NAWIC, USA and Canada. We were together, but we became global affiliates when Canada split off. And so Canada was our first global affiliate. And then we also had South Africa at the same time in 2005. That's when we started to work together globally in different ways. It's evolved. Australia joined us next. And it's evolved over the years. And so now the global partners include Canada, Australia, the UK, New Zealand, South Africa, Qatar, and we're adding Papua New Guinea and Singapore, and we continue to expand and join. So, and the global partners, actually now we've made ourselves sort of a committee, and we get together and speak once or twice a month, depending on where we're going. And we decided just recently to start doing 2 conversations a year. And this was our first subject, was child and family care. And we reached out for panelists. Again, thank you for being here. And so keep an eye out for, in another 4 or 5 months, we'll probably have another conversation of some sort, whether we continue this conversation or bring together another global issue or solution, whatever that happens to be. So we also do we share our websites and we share events. But we also have a hashtag. I don't know if you saw it if you were on LinkedIn or Facebook or any of the social media. We're using the hashtags WIC Rise Together, Women in Construction Rise Together, and WIC Global Talk. And we made a very cool banner, if you see it on my slide here, with all the different affiliates or partners so far and a symbol of each of their countries. So again, welcome. So we put out a survey in February. It had 12 questions. We invited comments as well as the questions that were there. And those comments further detailed individuals' experiences. And we got great responses. So we had 488 responses. They were mostly from the US, but we got good numbers from Australia and Canada as well. And some from New Zealand, UK, and actually we got one from India because we had the other box there from the list of countries, and one of them was from India. So just initially, I'm going to go through some of those survey answers and the graphs just before we get our panel discussion started. But I did want to mention, I did mention the countries. It was mostly, we asked whether you were male or female, and basically all the responses were from women. We did ask what was the average age or what was your age, and 70% of the respondents were 31 to 55 years old. And then we also asked where you were in your career, and most of the respondents were somewhere between 0 and 25 years in their career. And there's some beyond that and some over 64, 65, which is probably me. I'm the one person probably over 64 that answered the survey. But anyway, so that was sort of the beginning of the survey. And then we had question 5. So I just wanted to show you this. Has childcare been a factor impacting your career? So we had some yeses and mostly no's, but I just wanted to show you that. And if yes, we asked them, how did it affect their career? And we had those in the comments, and that's some of what we'll talk about today. Has any other family care requirements affected your career? In other words, there's also, besides childcare, there's also elder care, or maybe there's just somebody with a disability or something that you're taking care of at home. So there were some yeses there and those, and then we asked for commentary on that. How is childcare or family care currently provided for you? And there was some government subsidized, company subsidized, which is very little, a lot of relying on family or partner, and there was the respondents that did not need childcare, and then we asked for comments. And then in your opinion, how supportive is the construction industry in providing resources or accommodations for childcare? And some were very supportive, that's good to hear. Somewhat supportive, that's not so bad to hear. Many neutral, and much more not very supportive. So that's what we're trying to work through here today, is find out how we can be more supportive. What can we do to support families? Have you ever felt hesitant to discuss or disclose childcare needs with your employer in the construction industry? And we will get to some of this on the panel. I know we talked about it the other day, and there were a lot of yeses and there were some nos. So let me get to our panelists. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully you'll, just see the panelists and the rest of us. So panelists, again, thank you for being here. So I will want you to answer this first question, but introduce yourself in the beginning. So we have already had some great conversations around this issue. So I'd like each of you to introduce yourself and your background, and please give a personal reaction to the issue or the survey. So we'll start with Ariane.
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much. I'm really excited that you are looking at these issues and have done this survey. So my name is Ariane Hegewisch. I'm a senior research fellow at a think tank based in Washington, D.C. But we're doing mainly work on the United States. However, I've also worked in the UK before and done kind of comparative work in 30 or so countries, always on women in work, and that often included childcare. And I'm particularly excited to be on this call, or that you're organizing the call, because in a lot of ways at the moment, the United States are doing more than I can remember in my 20 years here and 40 years working on these issues. And also there are more women in construction than they have been ever before. So it feels like, we can push to get care more on the agenda. Thanks.
Awesome. Ryan?
Hi, everyone. I'm a senior project engineer for John Holland here in Australia. So John Holland's a principal contractor in the Tier 1 construction space. So we work on large-scale public infrastructure, road, rail, utilities, general civil, and I'm now getting into energy and renewables, which is an exciting challenge for me. My interaction with child and family care began when my son was born a couple of years ago. So I took 18 weeks fully paid primary carers leave through my company, which was fantastic, and took another 2 weeks through government. Nowadays, I juggle working from home with a toddler, which is pure chaos. He also goes to daycare once a week, and is cared for by his grandparents once a week. So that's all just to juggle things, so my wife can work 3 days a week, which works really well. To me, this is as much a male issue as a female issue. I feel like women have been pushing for equality in the workplace for decades, and I feel like what needs to change is predominantly male perspectives and behaviours, and the policies and the company government policies that sit behind that. And luckily, I've benefited from both of those sort of changing here in Australia.
Thank you so much. Your perspective is just so awesome to have it here. Thank you. Josephine?
Hi, guys. My name is Josephine Sindani. I am based out of Burlington, Ontario. I own a construction group called JS Group. I have been in construction for the last 13 years. I'm a single mother of 2 kids. They are older now, which is fantastic because they do not have to take them to job sites anymore. But family care as a single mother has been such an issue with construction for such a long time. While they were growing up, the difficulty of being on site and managing their time, paying $1 a minute for every time I am late to pick them up, and it gets pretty expensive. So having some support in the construction industry as a parent. And like Ryan says, it's not only just a woman's issue, it is a family issue also. So hopefully this discussion can really start something and change the direction of how we're looking at family care and construction. So yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Tara.
All right, good afternoon. I am here in El Paso, Texas. My name is Kara Lanigan, and I work for Clark Construction. We're a large construction firm here based here in the United States. We do about $6 billion in revenue and generally a top 10 ENR size construction firm in all product types. I've been with Clark since I was an intern, started when I was 19, and now I am the group CEO for what we call our central group. And if you look at the map of the United States and you look at Texas and you look at the east and the west side of Texas and just draw a column straight up all the way from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada, that's the space that I cover. And I've had a chance to hold a number of different positions in the company. Most recently, before this role, I oversaw all of our project delivery nationally, all of our operations. My specific experience with childcare is I am a mom of 3 children. I have a 16, a 15, and a 12-year-old. In my role, I've moved 14 times, all domestically within the U.S., predominantly around the East Coast and the Central South part of the country. And as I've grown up in the industry and also being a child of a father who was a member of the Carpenter and Pile Drivers Union, so I grew up with my dad going into the field every day, working with tools of the trade in his hand. Really having the opportunity as I've grown in leadership to create an environment, and what we talk about with my group is creating the best experience for our people, our clients, and our trade partners. And the only way to do that is really to make sure you're investing in not just the development professionally of our team members and employees, but also looking at them holistically and how are you creating the best experience for them and environment for their growth. And turning a blind eye to folks' family and their work outside of work is impossible to do that. So I'm excited about the conversation here today, and really am grateful and humbled to be on this group of panelists with these fantastic folks.
Yes, they are for Ken. And I forgot to introduce myself, but I just figured that was obvious. But Doreen Bartoldas, I'm actually a past national president of WIC US. And I have a 45-year career in construction, and I have a daughter who is actually 45 years old. So I was a single mom at a very young age. And so childcare affected me. It was a lot of stress. So I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Like Ariane said, things have changed and we're in that direction. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Okay, so question 2. So when we met as a group last week, we kind of focused on 4 main themes that came from the survey. The first, though, was essentially the availability of childcare, plus the work hours in construction, and flexibility overall of the industry when it came to providing care. Can you comment on both the issue and if you are seeing solutions within your sphere of influence? So here I'll start with Ryan.
Yeah. So here in Australia, childcare is difficult to come by. I'm not sure what the situation is globally, but we can often have in metropolitan areas, wait times of 1 to 2 years just to get into, your daycare of choice. And obviously, there's a wide range of quality amongst daycare options. Now, I won't really talk to what could change in that sphere from a childcare perspective, but where I see it changing within construction is providing more flexibility in the workplace to start to plug the gap. And I guess this starts a discussion around on-site and off-site roles. So I've worked in both. Currently, I'm in an office role, and it's just much easier to organise flexible work arrangements in that setting. Time, obviously, we have our deadlines, but it's perhaps not as critical. But on site, it's still very traditional. It's bums on seats. It's from pre-start at the start of the day to you've got to be there after your manager leaves. The show must go on. And I get it. There's a lot of challenges around construction, it's very rigid in terms of its project constraints. So, you know, you might be your timing of activities, construction-related activities, might be dictated by, you know, peak traffic periods. So you might need to start your work at nighttime when traffic dwindles. You might be dictated by daytime temperatures for concrete pours. You might be dictated by weekend work for rail possession. You need to wait for less passenger services for rail. So there are a lot of challenges, but I feel we can still get over the issues through good communication, setting up your teams properly, and implementing flexible arrangements. I know my company are trialing some programs on site to implement our policies more at a site level. In terms of flexibility as well, there's some things that I've seen done quite well, and again, I won't talk too much. I'll let the panel discuss more, but some things around the importance of having conversations. So I've seen that done really well at my company. I've been fortunate to benefit for some frameworks there. So that's having formal, informal discussions around talking with your managers, some of the tools that you can use, the prompts, the conversation starters, to discuss early some of your flexible work arrangements. And we've also got something called the Flex Wheel, which I really like, which is it sort of dictates the different options you have for flexibility. So part-time work, arriving late or leaving early for a pickup. And the intention is to have a sort of suite of solutions that meets your life stage. So for instance, I've got a 2-year-old. At the moment, I work from home one day a week, and that really helps me. So, but you know, in 5 years' time, that could look totally different. So you use a different combination of the wheel to meet your need, and it's all in an attempt to retain good people, retain our talent, and to foster a sort of sustainable culture within the business.
I'm very curious. Is that like a written policy you have that you could possibly
It is,
share?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So
Okay,
it
great.
is a written policy, and it's as simple as written statements that you can sort of start conversations with, and something that you can actually pluck ideas out of to make those conversations easier and to set up your flexible work arrangements.
Josephine, I figured I'd go to you next.
So like Ryan was explaining earlier, some of my notes. I'll also like to add not to be penalized for getting or having off-hour timeframes for inspectors and for anything to do with bringing concrete, just anything from the 7 to 3 o'clock p.m. time slot that we're so rigid and so used to. Why are we getting penalized for it? So if I have to pick up my son or my daughter at 5 o'clock, is it okay if we have a later appointment with the inspector around 6 o'clock to facilitate me being able to pick him up and then coming over? We're so stuck with like I said, the 7 to 3, and I understand some locations, like the warmer locations in Arizona and so they require you to start a little bit earlier, which I completely understand. But for us here in Ontario, it's something so common for us to do, and something so easy that we can implement, and that allows me as a construction owner to be able to say, hey, can we do it at such and such time, and not be penalized a $500 fee because the inspector is not going to be available until the next day. So and that also kills our time frame. It makes it difficult to again facilitate my clients being able to complete work. If the things behind the wall needs to be covered up on a certain day, then I won't be able to do that because, like I said, I have to move everything over one day, and then that affects the drywallers, the tapers, and so on and so on. So that's one thing I did want to mention. And just being able to have the support system. I don't know any other person or any other place that's giving us support as parents, or it's not a discussion that is very well known. Starting in the construction industry, I didn't know very many parents. that were in here, and having that support system and that communication with them, be like, okay, you know what, if you're staying late, I can go pick up the kids if they're close by. So having that community in the industry would have been something that I would have very much benefited from. But I felt very isolated in the industry as a woman. So, and it does hinder your ability to grow, and it does make it a little nerve-wracking, because you want to ask these questions, be like, okay, you know what, can we make it work with the allocated times I have with a sitter? But you get nervous. I am a little bit younger, so I'm like, okay, well, is this going to deter me from being able to continue on in the construction industry because of that? So yeah, it's nerve-wracking to be able to have a conversation with an inspector or a city planner or something like that, saying, you know what, I can't do it right now. Can we switch it up, or can we reschedule another time? But the next time they have is 2 weeks later. So yeah, that's what I have experienced in the industry. So
Yeah, you have such a unique, now you're a construction owner, so that's a very unique viewpoint. So Kara, I know you have, Clark has, so I think Josephine, I think you need, there you go, thank you. So Kara, please, your comments.
Yeah, so I appreciate Josephine and Ryan's perspective there. Our industry is all about great planning and great coordination, and we have some of the most phenomenal minds as when it comes to that. And it's like pulling on that thread just a little bit more to think about how do we again expand that to our people, our teams, and the experience of all of the team members that we have on site. And I'll share two thoughts here. One concept, and as our industry has gotten more complex, whether it's with VDC or the way that we approach takeoffs now using technology, 4D scheduling, there is a significant part of the business that is not dependent on the 7 to 3. Certainly, we still need people there for concrete placements and reinforcing inspections and the bricks and sticks going in place. But stepping back and looking at our estimating efforts, our pre-construction efforts, pricing change orders, again, the VDC component, are there roles within our industry, within our companies that really do truly have more flexibility and maybe even enhance the value to our clients and our teams by looking at those as a potentially off hours or a differently abled component of the team where they can support the team in a meaningful way or support multiple teams in a meaningful way and not affect, again, the bricks and sticks going in place. And one of the things that we've done within our group, because the team that I manage is so spread out, is we really do leverage. I have team members in every time zone in the U.S. And also that have different skill sets. And we really work with them to create the opportunity whether or not it's childcare related or another need that they have based on their season in life, for them to provide meaningful value and grow and develop and serve a specific function that maybe has a little bit more flexibility. The other thing I've seen is when we talk to our clients and the cities and the entities that we work with, there are some of those that are really absolutely fully invested in diversifying the workforce in a meaningful way. And I have seen clients, when they make this a priority, and that includes workforce development programs, childcare provided on site or in a discounted manner, internship programs, when the client makes it a priority, we as an industry get very creative in order how to respond to that. And to the extent that we can highlight and promote those within the industry, I think that just really increases kind of that follow-on attitude, the me too, that I want to be a part of that. I want to be seen as the leader in doing that. And again, I go back to great planning and great coordination, and we get very creative when it comes to building our work. And I think this is a space we can continue to be creative in.
Awesome. All right, Ariane, I am looking forward to your response to this.
yet. As I said before, it is a really interesting and exciting period of experimentation and trying new things. And I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm also part of something called the National Task Force on Tradeswomen Issues. So I'm a little bit more used to working with women who work on the tools rather than more professional office jobs. And I think one of the issues that you all mentioned is the one of construction hours, right? So 7 o'clock, I mean, often it's 6 o'clock, you have to be there, and then you have some travel. So there's been quite a lot of discussion of how we can grow the number of providers. And in the US, there's a childcare crisis anyways, who offer childcare at those early hours and can then take kids to schools or whatever. And they're really, so for example, there's a really exciting pilot in Boston, which was partly supported by pre-apprenticeship programs but also by the carpenters unions, but they're also working with people working in hotels, right, to make partnerships where you have very different work, but also have those hours. And trying to identify people who provide childcare in their homes specifically to kind of be there for construction workers. And, you know, Ryan, as you were saying, it's not just tradeswomen, it's often guys who also need that type of support. And there's a similar initiative, which is very long-standing, more focused at apprentices, but in Oregon, they started 2011 or so, but they have from the state, so tradeswomen work to get kind of support from the state to draw down some funds that were available, but they now have a coordinator who works with apprentices to also help them identify childcare at those early hours, as well as other supports you may need, right? Sometimes you may have to be out of town overnight. How do you do that when you have a kid? So really working on that type of attention. And the NAPTU, who are all the building trades unions in the United States, they have 2 pilots, one in New York and one in Wisconsin, where they have made some childcare monies available to, you know, monthly stipend. But the biggest, I think, help has been that they have a coordinator who kind of is able to scan in each state what type of resources there are, how you can find childcare. And I used to, you know, we work on women in work, so childcare and care work is essential. And I always used to poo-poo, if you know that word, kind of be a little dismissive of employers saying, yes, we provide resources on where to find childcare. But actually that has often been really helpful, because particularly if there are other people around who already can say, yes, I know that provider and you can trust them. So it's about growing the space, but also kind of, you know, I guess trying to think through where other resources can come in and where networking may be helping. And I just wanted to very quickly mention one other issue where there has been some movement in the US, and that's almost, you know, as a signpost to women, yes, you can work in this industry, is that some of the unions have really pushed to get maternity leave policies, because you know, if you work in a physical job in construction, it's often very hard to get going and keep going until the 8th or the 9th month. So they have addressed this as a health issue. And really it's a signal to say, you know, you are wanted in the industry.
Yes, I totally agree. So different. Okay, so another theme that came around the culture of construction and a male-female bias, where women are penalized if they need to leave work for a sick child or parent, for example, but men are praised as being like heroes. I'm going to ask you all to provide insight on how you may be working on changing this culture We also spoke here about the ability for people to be able to communicate their needs, and I think some of you talked to that before already, and have their employer work with them. I think your real kind of response to that, Ryan. But so here, Kara, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I love this question. And again, I think it's definitely something that I've experienced an evolution in over my career. When I was pregnant with my first son, I was promoted to a senior project manager, and then my second son, I was promoted to an exec. And I've had the good fortune of working for a company that has really always supported the development. And I think for me, what I had to overcome was feeling like I had to constantly overcompensate for the bias, because I was on a team of all men and I was the only one that's pregnant. And then I was on a team of all men and I was the only one that had a child. But what I think has been a real game changer for me and the teams that I get to impact is the concept of when you have diversity in leadership, it really gives a different perspective for everyone that's on the team. And so with this concept of bias, like starting with an equity across the board. And when I start up new projects, new groups, engage with different members of the industry, it's always from the place that I respect and want you to have a really robust life outside of work, whether that's your children, your parents, you love playing pickleball, whatever that is outside of work that's important to you, it is important to me. And setting that stage early and really focusing on when you're recruiting, you have a diverse recruitment panel, you have a diverse interview panel, because each one of us come to our space with a different set of perspectives and values. And the more people can see that, the better you are at eviscerating the bias. For me, I've been blessed to be able to lead teams that were half men and half women. And it's amazing what comes out of that, in the sense that everyone has this really robust respect for what life is like outside of work. And that as a leader, that desire to want to pull out and understand what's important to your team members and have them share that. Because once I know Josephine has two children, and those are important parts of her, and she likes to go see them play sports or dance or whatever that is, then all of a sudden that's part of our team. And the same thing with Ryan and his 2-year-old, and whether it's the time that he gets to spend out on the playground in the afternoons on those days that he works from home, or making breakfast for him in the morning on those days that he works from home, those become a part of your team dynamic and the culture that you're creating. And doing that equally across the board, not just asking me because I have kids, but asking everyone on your team what's important to them, and that we're recognizing everyone as who they are as individuals, inside and outside of work.
Okay, let me know if Clark needs somebody. I'm ready. So I'm just it's probably part of their success, right? That culture. Thank you. So Ryan, your response?
Yeah, no, that was a great response, Kara. And off the back of that, I think definitely looking at a holistic sort of point of view, and specifically perhaps more for men, I think it's making sure that childcare is seen as being important, because I think a lot of men perhaps don't see the importance of childcare, and that certainly would go a long way to getting more men involved, and that would then open up the space for a lot of women to return to work. And I know, Kara, you mentioned this in a previous question, but spotlighting examples of men and women that are doing things well. So that might be taking the leave, working flexibly, however that may look for people. Things that a lot of women have been doing for a long time, but men are sort of only taking into account now. And I've certainly experienced the halo effect myself, or the hero effect. Probably the fact that I'm on this panel is a good indicator. But I guess I'm not immune to the odd backhanded comment, and I know it happens a lot, men and certainly women. I guess this is part of a broader culture change that I think needs to happen. So there's a lot of issues in construction. You know, we've got such high rates of suicide. You look at, you know, long working hours, high stress environments, strict deadlines. All of these sort of go hand in hand. So if you can look at that holistic picture, start to break down that culture, and it becomes a more worker friendly environment. I know people make career choices based on this, right? So what I'd hope to see in the coming years is people joining construction because it's a flexible, work-life balanced, you know, sustainable industry that you can have a long career in. And I know that is starting to change off the back of a few policy changes, particularly at my company. I've seen colleagues, my brother-in-law wants to join the company purely because of the flexible policies. So it does work, and hopefully we can see that flowing through to women as well.
Awesome. So Josephine, you have your own company. What do you?
I need to be doing more. Cara, I think the Clark is doing a fantastic job. I try to implement as much as I can. Just because of the structure of how my company is, I can't be as flexible just yet, which keeps in mind that I need to start creating policies to facilitate that. And on top of that, I am trying very hard to hire more women contractors and more women trades. So keeping that in mind is something that, okay, you know what, when they do enter in the workforce for my company, or when they do work with me, I got to make sure that I have something in place for them for their childcare needs. And also including the bias with the males. Some of my guys would be getting phone calls from their partners and saying, hey, can you pick up the kids earlier? And for me, it's just a no-brainer. I'm like, of course, like that's not something that I would ever stop you from doing it. It doesn't do anything other than the fact that we're supporting the family and they work with me and I consider them as family. So it doesn't hinder their ability to complete the work. Having an early night just to pick up the kids and stuff like that, it doesn't hinder, like I said, the whole schedule. So again, just having that conversation, removing the stigma that's around it, and having my guys, who are mostly men, communicate with me saying that, hey, Josephine, like, I need to do such and such and such. And knowing that I'll be supportive in that is something that I need to start having more of a conversation of, because I don't think I'm doing enough. I really don't, now that I think about it. So just overall, how do I, as a company, as a smaller company, how do I create an environment for my employees that are going to be comfortable enough to have a discussion and have a conversation with me in regards to their childcare needs? And what am I going to do to start implementing these changes and doing so? So yeah, I need to do more. I do need to do more.
That's awesome. So Ariane, I like you. I've been using you to kind of close out some of these discussions. So love to hear from you. Thank you, Josephine.
They're very exciting discussions. I guess what I would add to that, it's almost, we started by saying, okay, there's bias, kind of the halo effect, right? And I sometimes think if we probably have to go through the halo effect and use it, and just push and praise and think of ways in which we can almost force men to take up the benefits that are possible. So for example, you know, they've been a few campaigns again, in California, they had a big campaign aimed at the building trades to get men to take up the kind of paid parental leave that was available to them, and then to really tell those stories, right? Make it known that they take it, even though sometimes it's a little harder to do that. And I think, you know, both clearly Cara and all three of you in companies, that companies have policies to say it's okay to have care responsibilities. And we also need to really loudly tell the stories around this. The second issue, I was just recently here in the US, the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimundo, she's called, they recently started a big initiative around, building a domestic electronic chips infrastructure. And as part of the contracts for that, both for the building of new facilities, and then when factories run, the contractors of larger contract must provide a childcare plan to say how there will be access to quality, affordable childcare. And she was saying that she got incredibly attacked for doing this. We were all on the call saying, yes, wonderful, And she said, you can't imagine, I got so many, I was really attacked because people were saying investing in chips and infrastructure, that's kind of economic policy and growth, and you should care about that. Investing in childcare is a social issue. Why are you meddling with social issues, right? And everybody who works on this knows it's retention, it's advancement, it's getting diverse teams, it's getting higher productivity. So also to almost have those stories so that we can say, this is in the interest of the bottom line. And we've known this for for years, right? If you lose an experienced professional worker, whether it's a trade worker or an engineer or, construction project manager, because you cannot figure out childcare, to get that person back and to fill the gap that you have until the new person is up to scratch, costs you a lot of money. And the way we need to get this more into the actual project management and decision-making on these issues. So I think both the communication and the business case arguments are really key in creating more culture change going forward.
Totally agree. Show them the money and then there'll be a change. Thank you so much. Wow. Okay. So another aspect of having family care needs, which affects women, and Carrie, you talked a little bit about this before, actually, is the loss of the ability to advance in your career or their careers. One example comment we received said she lost about 7 years in her career as a primary caregiver. So please, as you did in the prior question, speak to how you have seen or experienced this issue. And Carrie, you did speak to, I think you went ahead and moved ahead in your career. But what solutions you and your company are working on this or should work on? Carol, let's start with you.
Thanks, Doreen. So I think we all know rising in our industry is grit, hard work, tenacious learning, and I think most importantly, team building and developing leadership skills. And I think we spend that first 4 to 5 years just becoming technical experts. I don't care where you went to college or trade school. None of us know, the first day we get on the job, what we're doing. Maybe we know what an RFI is, maybe we know, but it is truly on the job learning, regardless of what aspect of the industry that you're in. And I've had the unique fortune to be able to not skip a beat. I took leave with each one of my kids, but I worried about it. Even though it didn't negatively affect me, I worried about being surpassed by my peers. And so, as a leader, I've always tried to have the conversation with my team member, both just any kind of leave, parental leave, medical leave, maternity leave, and said, what do you want this to look like when you come back? What are your goals? And I think the biggest mistake we made is assuming we know what each individual wants without having an individual conversation, and recognizing that's not a one and done. That is, I'm going to talk to you today. I'm going to talk to you and congratulate you after you've been on leave. I'm going to talk to you a few months later, because it is truly a conversation that evolves, and it may not look the same each time you have a child or have to take leave. And I think it is our responsibility as leaders and as employees to feel empowered to have that conversation. That one, you don't have to, you're not writing in the stone tablet that's never going to get changed. This is something that is a agile conversation that is your needs and your personal situation changes, that you should be empowered to have the conversation with your leader, and creating the space for that understanding and growth during the time away. Even when I've had, and we have some very senior leaders at Clark who took years away, and whether it was maternity leave or other types of leave, and they came back and now they hold C-suite level positions in our organization. And I'd encourage everyone to realize that while you're away, it doesn't mean you're not learning anymore, that you're increasing your maturity, you're having more experience in the world that equip you with skills that you don't even know you're being equipped with in the moment. And to appreciate that and not undersell yourself. If you decide to leave your position and then come back 3 years later, it doesn't mean that, it's the next page in the book. You've written all kinds of new chapters that you haven't even anticipated, and that you need to appreciate and share. So to me, it's a really exciting challenge, and it's really about empowering our people to have the conversation, and empowering our leaders not to assume that they know one individual is the same to the next.
That was awesome. So Ryan, actually, I was going to go to you next on this. Thanks.
Sure. So in my position, I didn't take, I guess, extended leave, in the sense that we're talking months, not years. So perhaps I'm not the common case, but I certainly haven't experienced a slowdown in my career by taking parental leave, or through the flexible work arrangements I have at the moment. But I think it was Cara that mentioned, there's so many roles in a construction company that are available, all with a variety of flexible options. So I chose my current roles in the pre-contract space, which is office-based, and that brings with it a whole lot of opportunity to shift things around to suit my schedule. So that's been a bit of a change. I feel like that's probably slowed my progress on site, in the sense that, on project, I perhaps may have progressed in a site-based setting, but I haven't felt like it's hindered my career. I'm learning lots in my current role. It's a little bit different, but certainly there's some benefit to that. So there's a lot of options for people there, and that's in the context of some big changes as well, right? So I would like to see a lot more of this implemented at a site level. And I think that's happening, but broadly within construction and in Australia, we're seeing a lot of change. So I'd say the majority of Tier 1 contractors in Australia have policies similar to John Holland. So that's 18 weeks paid leave on top of government paid leave. We're also transitioning at a government level from 20 to 26 weeks paid parental leave, which is shared between parents. I think that the secondary carer has to take a minimum amount of that leave, maybe 4 weeks, but it's to encourage both sets of parents, if there are two sets of parents, to take the leave and get involved. But obviously, as I said, there's a bit of a lag down the site. While I was on leave, a couple things that were good to know that are embedded in our policies. So there's something called keeping in touch. So Cara, again, you probably touched on this. While you're on leave, you can fully step off work mode, but I found it quite useful to keep in touch with my manager. And it's just to ensure that two-way communication while you're on leave. Make sure your manager knows what your intentions are, when you want to come back to work, what you want to come back to work to do, what your options are in terms of how you return to work, and also for your manager to understand where you're at, what you'd like to do, and detail your options. So lots there to talk about and keep in touch. And then there's also considerations for those on parental leave to be considered in succession planning, which I think is important as well, because I guess you're not then losing out on your career. At least you're considered moving up the ranks while you're on leave. So that's important as well.
Great, thank you. Josephine, any comments?
My view is a little different just because I do own the company and it is a smaller company. I was pregnant up until I was doing jobs up until I gave birth, essentially. So for both my kids, I didn't really take any parental leave. The company just didn't allow for me to do that just because I had other mouths to feed. So it was my responsibility to make sure that I am outsourcing contracts and dealing with payroll. I am the company. So whether it's dealing with all the different roles that is associated with running the company, I wasn't able to facilitate to have an accounts manager, to have an estimator, to have this and this and this, to do all those other roles. So I would take my kids with me. So I would have him in a sling. I will take him with me to do quotes and estimates. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. I chose opening the company because I wanted to do something for myself, because I didn't find any other company that was able to help me be a mother and still be in the construction industry. And they didn't have any help for childcare. I didn't have my mom here with me. She was in Vancouver at that time, and now that she has moved here, it's been a blessing to have someone that can come over, watch the kids if I have to stay a little bit later. So just dealing with all the fluidity with construction, it's not a set time, it's not a set role that I'm in. Everything is kind of up in the air and I kind of move along with it. It's been difficult, but like Ryan and Cara mentioned, is just to facilitate having those policies that when I do have someone hired and as a female or a male, that they do have that support system coming back to the company. They do have that interaction with me saying that, hey, you know what? I'm looking to come back to work a little early. Okay, well, let's give you some refresher courses for AutoCAD or something like that. Maybe there's something new in the industry that you need to be refreshed on. So like I said, I didn't have that opportunity because I'm so involved in the company and I'm so on site, as well as in the back. I'm working until 10, 11 o'clock sometimes at night, trying to grow the company and grow the business so that I'm able to hire and delegate the work that I'm doing 24/7. So those are just different aspects of what I hope to continue to do and what I hope the company is going to grow into, and making sure in these conversations, again, keeping in mind, okay, Josephine, how are you going to do this for the company? How are you going to make it easier for other people who work for you to help them in the childcare, to help them feel comfortable communicating with me, and to not feel like they're left in the middle of nowhere with no help and no resources, because like I said, that's how I felt ever since starting this company. But I love construction. I love the industry. I just want it to be more conducive to parenting, because it's a fact of life where we have parents in so many different avenues, whether it's on the books or on the table or on site. Like, we need to figure out a way to do better because we're not doing enough. We really aren't. So yeah.
So great. Yeah. Again, your perspective is so unique
Yeah.
because you're an owner. Yeah. Right,
It's
Ariane?
different. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's just so different because I love Cara and the company that you work for. I strive to have that ability to do that. And having, again, this discussion is like, okay, well, how do I communicate with the lawmakers? How do I communicate with the unions and say, okay, you know what? Let's get this conversation started. Like, how do we do that? And Ariane, like you said, you're doing amazing work in Boston. You're doing amazing work where you're making conversations happen. So how do we get to do that in Canada and in Ontario? Because that's not something that we're doing currently right now.
You know, that is so that you said this, that I was thinking, what will my pitch be? And my pitch is like how collectively as an industry, it's hard for each company to invent childcare, right? So how can we work with public policy makers to make sure that at least it's not so hard to find childcare and that at least it's not so incredibly expensive. And there's certainly, the task force that I'm part of does have members in Canada. It's more tradeswomen, but I can connect you also to some of the people there who probably would love to have you as a voice sometimes, and pushing for more childcare. Although I always see childcare from the US, we see everywhere else is so much better off on childcare and leave than we are. So the second issue I thought was that where I'm thinking, as I said, I primarily work with tradeswomen who don't do the office work, right? So the pressure to be on site is even bigger than for you guys who also have often very long hours. And so whether there is any scope for experimentation, to have job sharing, maybe, maybe some positions are possible. And I know that kind of for a lot of people I talk to, if it was 7 to 3 would be good, right? Often there's overtime coming up because there are too few people, and you have to have even longer periods on job site. Whether other positions where it can be 6 hours and 6 hours maybe, or like in manufacturing where you have 3 days on, 2 days off, or kind of, I think we can in the construction industry could do with more experimentation to see what more is possible. And I know I recently was on it's one company in Texas, I think, Texas or Louisiana, with other partners who are now offering 8 to 3 work hours on demolition, right? Maybe demolition is easier to do. But I think more experimentation on alternative working patterns and flexibility would be really helpful.
Thank you. I just want to put out to the audience here that we kind of allotted till 5:30. I have one more question which I'll cover, and I do have another one after that. But if there's any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll ask Savannah to read them to us. But let's cover this last question, and then we'll get sort of open discussion or a Q&A if there's some questions out there. So, in addition, in our survey, the topic of on-site office conditions for nursing mothers and pregnant women. So basically safety and privacy. I wanted you to share your thoughts on that one more issue. So maybe I'll start with Ryan here.
Sure. Yeah, I certainly remember the hassle of dropping my son off at my wife's workplace for her to breastfeed. My son never took the bottle, so that was always a logistical challenge that I can certainly understand. I suppose I can't speak to how comfortable or uncomfortable it may be to nurse or pump in particularly a site-based setting. Certainly would be confronting, I imagine. But at the same time, I really think it's important to talk about. I remember having a discussion with a female colleague on site and a group of men, and the word breastfeed came up. All the men went absolutely red-faced and silent, and the conversation was absolutely dead. So men need to talk about it a lot more, and that's the sort of environment we're asking women to nurse in, to pump in. So certainly a lot of learning that has to happen there, and a bit of a culture change. In terms of facilities, I'm aware that certainly in John Holland, it's sort of on a project by project basis. There's not a standard solution here. But I've certainly seen some projects do it well. So making provisions for a pumping or feeding room, fridges, a lot of flexibility around start times, finish times. I'm also aware of, in Australia, the onus is on the employer to ensure that a pregnant woman has a safe place to work. So for instance, a blue collar worker working as an electrician or something similar, maybe putting their unborn child at risk in certain scenarios, so the employer is obligated to then relocate that that person to a more suitable role. So, and that's a really good thing.
So Josephine, I was going to go to you next on this. Yeah.
So just to put in perspective, July 1st, 2023, we just implemented a law that we need women toilets on construction sites. So for us in Canada to have the space or a room or porter area that women can go in to breastfeed, say that their kids have to come on site or something like that. It's just the safety. How do we create a safe environment, especially if we're on site? Do we need to have an off-site area that's close to the site that we can breastfeed or pump, or have a fridge that's able to put the breast milk in it for later on? So things like that is going to be such a hard climb, I find, because it's not something that, again, we communicate to employers and legislations for whatever reason. I feel like women are scared to have that conversation because they're going to be shunned. They're going to be like, okay, you know what? Never mind. You should not be on this job site because you require too much effort to make it work, you know? But again, having a toilet is something that's so common. There's a male and female toilet everywhere else. Why isn't it on job sites also? So again, trying to work with these industry experts to say, okay, how are we going to be able to have a safe space to create breastfeeding, to create the logistics, to have a fridge on site so you can pump, to have the privacy to do that. It's not something that's very difficult to facilitate. It just requires a little bit more effort. And that's where we need to do better as a company and as panelists, to have that conversation. How do we do a little bit better? So, yeah.
We just got somebody telling us what the US law is in the chat. So it'd be interesting if you read through that. Thank you for that. So Kara, your comments on this.
Yeah, so we have at Clark embarked on a journey here the last few years to be intentional about the planning of our what we've called wellness spaces, both in our offices and on our job sites. And going back to some of the earlier conversation on bias and how do we show up and really create the space for everyone to be successful. And I think Ryan mentioned the alarming suicide rate in our industry. Stepping back and saying, okay, some of the resistance you get from a project team is, in the past we've had like one single wide trailer, and how we're going to take a space and we're going to designate it. There may not even be any females on site. And so what we've stepped back and said, it's not about who's on site today. It's about creating the space and experience that anyone that comes on our site can feel welcomed, included, and the ability to be themselves and successful. And that may not be someone on your team. That may be the client that shows up that had a child 4 months ago, and they're making an all-day site visit, and they're the ones that need to use that wellness room to pump for that hour. It could also be that we have a team member that has a mental health appointment that they need a private space. With this move towards open work atmospheres, and however you feel about that, but everyone living and breathing in the same space, there is a need as humans for us to have private moments, and whether that's a telehealth appointment, a mental health appointment, or pumping and caring for a child in that manner, being intentional about the space that we create, and having a space that while absolutely designated for the privacy of a new mother also can be used for the benefit of the whole team. And when you start to talk about it in a way that gives the experience and really starts to identify and meet the individual needs where they are, it's really becomes a really positive conversation for the teams on site. And so that is the journey that we've been on. It is a journey because it is a cultural shift to approach it, but very much needed cultural shift in order to build the teams that we need to build the built environment that we're also very proud of.
Awesome. And so, you know, it is very important that, I don't know, Josephine, if you work as a sub sometimes, but when the lead contractor is acting this way and they're putting that culture out there, then that goes, hopefully goes to their
It
subs.
goes both ways. Exactly. It definitely goes both ways. I've worked with as a subcontractor doing the Sheraton Hotel when the Pan Olympic Games were going on, and they had a prayer room. And at that time, I just gave birth to Mateo, so they allowed me to use that space to pump. And there was a freezer in there also, so I could leave the breast milk there. So again, I'm now looking at my own company and seeing the growth of it. This is something, that conversation that I never thought I would be having with myself. And again, just noticing that I need to do more to be able to make this something that's going to be not only for the present time, but the longevity of the company and the policymakers saying, hey, this is something we need to do.
Ariane, I just want to say, Ariane, I'm thinking about the fact that trades, they work with unions, and unions do agreements with contractors. So hopefully those contractors are like Clark when the women get there. So I don't know, I'm thinking there's a different perspective you can bring to this whole conversation.
You know, we always call it in and around the unions. So unions also are mainly male, and you saw, you know, kind of tradeswomen aren't. I mean, there are over 100,000 women construction managers, right? But on the unions, women are just less than 5% in the trades. So I think we kind of all need to work together to change this. But what was, I think, two issues that were really interesting to me. You know, firstly, on how to change the culture. I last year I gave a talk here in DC to a NAWIC chapter, and we were discussing this issue of lactation pods and toilets, right? I mean, it's ridiculous that we still have to argue for something like clean women only toilets, right? And they were just like, oh, no, that's not so hard. We as contractors, you know, it's not that expensive. We just need to put it into the contract right at the beginning with the developers, right? And I think to kind of say it just has to be there right at the start. And then it's not something, oh my God, she kind of requires all this additional investment. It's just there. And I think the point that Kara made, that the whatever the wellness rooms, you know, they set a real signal. There's this other company, their pods, that Mama Va is a company who use these pods, lactation pods, which are mobile, and Turner used them in New York quite a bit. It sets a signal, right? It says, we are diverse, this is okay, you know, you are wanted. And I think that is really important. And with coming to the unions, I do think, you know, that they are women and guys in unions. I think it's generally the industry realizes that they need to diversify. Not everybody does, but a lot of them do, right? And so to give concrete ideas, such as having those pods or wellness rooms also put into contracts straight away, or having maternity leave or whatever, you know, it's if we can keep giving concrete examples and keep pushing, then I think it may end up more on the negotiating table, not be kind of chucked out when it comes, you know, which often happens, but then it may actually get into contracts. And again, in the United States, where they are really, as they say, you know, probably not just one generation, two generation high levels of investment, public investment in construction through infrastructure spending and CHIPS Act and so on. There are really high expectations that they will produce greater diversity and access to those jobs. So there are pressures that, you know, companies should need to respond to. And I think there's also increasingly, there are examples and technical assistance around for those who want to change the culture, knowing that you can't just do it overnight. So I think we just need to keep pushing with examples of how it can be done.
Yeah, I may have lost my technical assistant. I don't know if she's back there, but I'm not seeing too many questions in the chat, but I do see comments. I don't know if, are you guys seeing the chat as well? So congratulations, they love all that Clark is doing, for sure. In Australia, we are asking for tax exemptions on facilities as we are still facing issues where there are no toilets on sites, even though it is legislated. So, yes, it seems like understanding of the return on investment for wraparound services like childcare would provide. Yes. So I will ask, you know, this one more question was sort of a wrap up, but I think we kind of touched on it. And it's, you know, there's a lot of complexities around this whole subject, around cost-effective childcare. Just last week, actually, the New York City mayor, I was like listening to the radio the other day, and our New York City mayor has proposed to the city council looking at universal childcare in New York City. So universal childcare is something that's been out in the US. They're talking about that. So I don't know how much that would help. So there's, you know, do the contractors provide childcare? Does the government provide childcare? Is there subsidies? Is there, so I figured we kind of would close out with this if we didn't have any questions, but maybe sort of close out the topic with this. So Ariane, maybe we'll just start with you there.
Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned some examples, and I think it's a really good time in the US at the moment to work on these issues. Because there seems to be a coalition both from the industry and then there are also childcare providers and state level. And so I think, I mean, again, from Boston, what they have done there, which to me is a very good example, and they've had this for a few years, it's any large contract, whether it's public or private, a proportion of that contract has to go into the city's childcare fund to kind of grow childcare for everybody, because in the US, you know, we still have a crisis of provision. And that also includes, for example, that type of childcare that is there to help you with construction hours, you know, home-based childcare. They are shrinking because the pay there is even lower than for normal childcare workers, right? So there's some initiative to get their the pay of the childcare workers up. Also, not maybe to same level as union construction work is ambitious, but to really grow that field, and that helps. But I also think the other non-childcare related issue, childcare is a huge thing. You need leave, you need childcare, but you also need flexibility, right? And whether there isn't more we can do with AI also to help us deal with childcare, to network, to do schedule exchanges. And I always think, you know, if you think of hospitals also have to work round the clock, lots of women, it's mainly women who work, do that type of work. And they seem to have done more to do flexibility, to do shift swapping, to have on-site childcare, to work on those. So maybe it's also to have collaborations with other industries that look very different, but particularly going jointly then going to the city or the state where you're in to say, okay, we need support here, that may also help.
Awesome. Ryan, maybe you can talk a little bit about, Australia and what's happening around you. Thank you, Ariana.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose apologies for talking so much about men on a panel about women, but I see this the solution, long-term solution, being men getting involved in daycare. I know that probably doesn't solve all problems, but it would do a huge advancement towards childcare, valuing childcare more. As Ariane said, pay for childcare workers, cost of living, gender pay gap, all those issues fall into this category. I don't say this to deter parents, but you don't have to do a whole lot of research to know, the best environment for your child up to the age of 3 is generally with a parent or a relative. Women couldn't possibly do more in this field, so I really think men need to do more. And what would open up that space is companies and policy changes, providing more men the space to take on childcare roles, which then would open up opportunities for women to re-enter the workplace. I guess benefits for women are benefits for everyone, in particular for men as well. Benefits, we want to see women in the workplace, we want more diverse teams, we want to keep our talent and our staff. Individually, we see more empathetic people, we get work-life balance, which often isn't possible in construction, more engagement with your work and those sorts of things. So yeah, it's a win for everyone.
I forgot who where, okay, I was so taken up with your answer. Right, men do more, by the way. Any more men out there? Do more, thank you. I do have a brother who's a stay-at-home dad, actually, or has been a stay-at-home dad. So Kara, actually, maybe we can comment on this and then we'll go to Josephine.
Yeah, I'll echo Ariane and Ryan, just fantastic points. I really think our clients have an opportunity here to contribute to and it creates value for them in an industry where there are, and you hear lots of different figures, but in 10,000 more jobs than there are people to fill them. By expanding the pool of the workforce, your job, whatever you want to build as a client, it only creates more certainty in schedule and budget if you have a workforce that's going to show up every day. And it is a competition right now. If I can go to a job, Arian, you've talked quite a bit about the craft labor, the trade labor, the tradespeople. If I can go across the street and there's day care and a nice break area, and I have a place to sit that is respectful of my person to eat lunch and take a break, and a bathroom facility that honors what I'm contributing to that project, and I have the choice to go to that job versus the job across the street that looks something out of like Peanuts Pigpen, and maybe there's nice porta pots, but gosh, you're all kind of scratching your one eye, like, oh, I'm not sure. I think thinking about the environment we're creating for our craft and our professional workforce on site, and as a client, as someone that wants to build something and have certainty in cost and budget, man, doesn't it make sense for me to create the best environment for those people to show up every day? And I saw in the chat someone describing, like, what is that ROI that we can put a value to? To me, that's the conversation we should be having. It's almost as if it's a cost of the work, right? You want certainty in the labor force that's going to show up in your job. But what are we doing in order to create the environment for that labor force who want to show up on your job? And by the way, if you expand that to women and parents that have children, you have that much more available labor to you than everyone else on the block. So to me, thinking about the conversation a little bit differently, almost hearkening it back to the way we talked about safety 25 years ago, and elevating it to that level really could be a game changer.
Oh, totally agree. Yes, bring it to the level or include it in the safety, include it, I'll just read this comment and I'll go to you, Josephine, after that. The push is to require owners and GCs, meaning general contractors and CMs, construction managers, put this into their pre-job must-have list. Make it a routine part of the setup. It simply never occurred to them before. It must now. That's the legacy of the gender-based first 200 years of this industry, or maybe more. Moving forward, things must be different. And as we have a new reality with more gender diversity, new generations who require this as a priority. And yes, she said, good conversation. So also consider family care, inclusive elder care, and children. So Josephine, your thoughts?
So just to close it off, we have a labor shortage when it comes to construction. We also have a housing shortage. Trying to get more females in the industry to be able to see the value of working in construction is so important. We have all these programs that the government is pouring money into for getting women into construction, but they don't see the after effect that's required once they do finish the trades, once they do continue being in the industry. You want to have a family. This is just the natural progression that some women would want to do. So we may have all these programs for young adults and young females to get into construction, but we cannot facilitate childcare for them after their program is done or after they get into construction. So what are we going to do? How do we remind the governments and the policymakers that, okay, you know what, this is a fantastic program to get females into construction, but we need to do more. How do we create that space for them? So being aware of, okay, you know what, we're trying to get these 10, 15% more what's it called, labor or more women into the force to kind of bridge that gap, but we're just leaving them there. We're leaving them there. So where's the growth later on? How do we create an environment again to help them continue being happy in their outside lives? Because it's stressful. It's going to cause them to not want to be in the industry because there's nothing for them. So yeah, let's see.
Okay, so I'll just say I just got chills because as I said before, I've been in the business for 45 years and, I was a single mom and the stresses were having daycare. And having even family was helping me. It was still very stressful and very, so these conversations are great. The solutions are actually somewhat obvious. I'm glad to hear there's experimenting out there. Ariana, you're talking about pilots. And I'll just read this from, because it's a guy, I believe, Ben. In Australia, we have the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, and companies with over 100 employees must report each year a whole bunch of data. They must respond to a number of questions about parental leave and care. So this can become a place to compare and see what the market offers, and competitors, etc. This transparency can support people see the support companies offer see who supports the companies offer before, what supports the companies offer before they join, similar to what you're saying, Kara, or demonstrates opportunities for those competitor leaders to improve supports, etc. So yes, awesome. So this has been a wonderful conversation. We obviously have solutions ready to go. So people just, reach out to us. We know what they are. One of the things I said when we got together is because I heard it at a presentation recently is like, we all do better when we all do better, and we all do better when women do better. So this is not just about women, it's about family. And Ryan, you kind of pointed that out. That's why we have you here. This is great. So I just want to thank you all again for being here. And we have this recorded if anybody had registered and didn't see it. And yes, and this is a global conversation. Again, I'm having a little bit of chills. So thank you so much for being here. And we will talk again soon. Ariane, we'll meet again, I'm sure. So keep doing what you're doing, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you all attendees.
See you guys. Savannah, if you're still out there, let me know.